Hi, in this video I'm going to talk about my interests. When I was a teenager, I became very, very interested in the actress Kate Winslet after I saw the film Titanic. I was 11 years old at the time. Initially I was very, very interested in the Titanic disaster, and I received a book about the Titanic for Christmas. And I devoured this book. I was so excited when I received this book, and I leafed through the pages and studied the Titanic in great depth, and learnt everything I was to know about the Titanic, how many rivets there were on the boat, all the details, the names of the passengers. I was just transfixed by the Titanic disaster. Not entirely sure why, but I think I was drawn to the sadness of the event, and it just struck a chord with me, and I became very, very interested in Titanic. And I saw the film, as I say, and fell in love with the character Rose, played by Kate Winslet. I loved this character, Rose. I mean, how beautiful she was. She really was she was really, really, really attractive, and I just fell in love with her, and ended up seeing the film Titanic so many times that I ultimately learnt the screenplay off by heart without trying, because I saw it so many times. I used to enact the screenplay. I could do the accents right from the start of the film right through to the end. And I watched the film on repeat. Particular scenes were played the most, particularly the ending when Jack dies. I found that very moving, and it brought tears to my eyes. Eventually, the Titanic obsession, being obsessed with the historical event of the Titanic, became less important, and it was eclipsed by the interest in Kate Winslet. And I ended up seeing all of Kate Winslet's films, right from Heavenly Creatures, which was her first film, all the way through to her later works, including For Holiday, Holy Smoke, all her films, every single one of them. And not only her films, but also every single drama she had ever been in. Right from when she started acting, when she was about 16, I saw every single thing she had been in. I collected all of her photos. I was always going up to the shops to check Hello magazine, OK magazine, the celebrity magazines, to make sure I hadn't missed a Kate Winslet photo. And I stuck all her photos in a scrapbook, all of Kate Winslet's photos in chronological order, and I would look at her photos every single day before I went to bed. I'd look at her photos. I'd study all the details, including what she was wearing, how she had her hair, everything. Every single detail was soaked in. I was absolutely transfixed and obsessed by this amazing person, Kate Winslet, who was so beautiful in my eyes. And then, when Kate Winslet had a baby, Mia, in the year 2000, I gradually started to become interested in babies. And this interest kind of took on a life of its own, although it was essentially related to Kate Winslet. I started to read parenting magazines, Mother and Baby, Practical Parenting, Mother and Birth, all the parenting magazines. Again, I read in great detail, including the advertisements. I soaked up all the information. I read books by Miriam Stoppard. I knew everything else to know about child development, pregnancy, how to wean a baby, how to look after a baby, everything. I took it all in because of Kate Winslet, essentially. I also collected the paraphernalia that came with the magazines, the little toys, the nursery rhymes. I would listen to nursery rhymes on repeat because I could think to myself, well, Kate Winslet's probably playing these songs to her baby. So that made me feel closer to Kate Winslet. Really, the whole world in my eyes, was seen through the lens of Kate Winslet. I could only get interested in other things if they were connected in my mind to Kate Winslet. It was that intense. With regards to babies, I used to follow people with babies through the high street. Children up until the age of about 5, really, but particularly young babies. I used to follow them down the high street and take detailed notes in my notebook. Really, really, very, very detailed notes. The tiniest movements of a baby were jotted down, and I've got my notebook here so I can read a little bit out just to show you what I mean. Okay, let's find. Okay, so this was written down on holiday in Cornwall. In the town of Looe, in the late afternoon, I saw a little yellow-haired girl, aged around 2.5 or 3, who was taken into a street corner by her mother. The girl wore pink fleece and pink leggings. I saw a baby with large blue staring eyes in mother's arms in West Looe. There was a 3-wheeler there. The baby had a red hood on. It was then passed into father's arms. It was around 4 or nearly 4 months. It wore socks, and although I did not note this down, there was a blanket around it, as it was carried by the mother and then father, and there was a bit of bare leg above the socks. I smiled at the baby, and it seemed to be staring at me with its large blue staring eyes. The baby then made some noises, and then started to lightly cry. It was passed back into the mother's arms, and they walked off. Some more here. Let's find some more. A baby in a sling, where the baby faces the mother's chest, had one bare foot and half a leg, and one white sock on the other leg. Train to Chichester. Baby. It tapped the table. The baby was quite low, a very alert, noisy baby. We came into Fareham, but did not stop. Baby was still quiet, not doing much now. The baby was motionless in the mother's lap. The mother looked at the baby and smiled. After quite a while, the baby still quiet. It might be sleeping, although I cannot see its face. The mother looked at the baby. The boys opposite were eating polos. The baby, I noticed, was awake, but just gazing intently. Might have overexhausted itself. We came into Havant. One of the boys opposite was fleshier than the other. They were blonde. The thinner one wore glasses. The thinner one was tall for its age. The lady with the now quiet baby was smiling. The baby was still quiet, body motionless, in mother's lap. Baby was now asleep, eyes shut, little black eyelashes, arms hanging down. The fleshier boy opposite laughed and cleared his throat. Baby stays still, in a peaceful slumber. Soon will grow up a sweet, happy baby, enjoying life. So this was all written down when I was about 12, 13 years old, and there are many, the notes go on and on and on and on. I kept many notebooks, just to highlight there how obsessed I was. The baby obsession also motivated me to volunteer at a nursery school, which I kept up for a couple of years. And when I got home, I took detailed notes of everything the kids ate, what they wore, what they said, in forensic detail, really minutious detail. And as I said, I became an expert in babies and child development, just as I became an expert in Kate Winslet, and this consumed my whole life. And this obsession was maintained for almost a decade. There was, I have to say, this obsession was actually quite positive, because this was at a time in my life when I was quite isolated. I didn't have any friends. I was going through adolescence. My life was, obviously I was very anxious. There was a lot of anxiety, and I think this obsession helped me. It gave me order. It gave me structure. it made my world very enjoyable. It was a very enjoyable obsession because I was so interested in it. It gave my life a lot of meaning and a lot of purpose. Even though my interests were very narrow and very intense, they still gave me meaning and purpose. And actually, I would say helped me get through school and helped me get some good grades in my GCSEs and A levels. Because although I was only really interested in Kate Winslet and babies, I could indirectly get interested in other things by relating them in my mind to Kate Winslet. So, for example, when I was learning about the Second World War in history, I could think to myself what Kate Winslet might have been like if she'd grown up in the Second World War, and how this related to Kate Winslet. And, when Kate Winslet was at school, she would have learned about the Second World War. So there were ways of connecting subjects that weren't directly related to Kate Winslet to Kate Winslet. And this meant that I could find meaning elsewhere, and this helped me to focus at school as well. So in that respect, the interest was very positive. I mean, and as I said in another video, left to my own devices, I probably wouldn't have done particularly well at school. It was mainly thanks to my parents putting in place structure and making sure that I did revise, and eventually I internalised this structure and gradually began to enjoy revision on my own. But I think Kate Winslet did help because she motivated me and inspired me to do well. So that's where having a special interest was helpful at this time. And Kate Winslet obsession very gradually petered out because when I went to university, obviously I had other commitments. I couldn't spend quite so much time on a Kate Winslet obsession. I went to my local university and studied history. And, I had to focus on writing essays, doing my dissertation, so I had less time for Kate Winslet. The Kate Winslet obsession didn't disappear overnight. It very, very gradually lost its intensity. I was actually quite worried when I noticed I was no longer quite as obsessed with Kate Winslet as I used to be, because I was thinking to myself, what will replace the Kate Winslet obsession? Without Kate Winslet, what is there in the world to give my life meaning? I was actually quite worried. I didn't want to lose the Kate Winslet obsession. But I needn't have worried really, because it was at that point in time that Kate Winslet was eclipsed by other interests that also took on a great deal of intensity. When I was at university, I actually started to become interested in the subjects I was learning in their own right, even when they weren't connected with Kate Winslet. So I became interested gradually became interested in other things. For a time, for example, I became very interested in interpreting fairy tales. I became very interested in the French philosopher Lacan, and I read a lot about his work, and interested in nutrition. So these other interests became very, very intense, and then went away. So it seems that I don't think there's ever been a time in my life when I've been without a very extreme obsessive interest for long. Kate Winslet was the most extreme obsessive interest so far in my life, but I've always had something there that I've just become obsessed with. It seems to be kind of in my DNA. Currently, I would say my obsession is public speaking, preparing talks. I'm very, very passionate about that. That brings me enjoyment, but at the same time it brings me anxiety as well, because when you get so obsessed with something, there is obviously always a risk that you might not be able to pursue that interest, or something might get in the way. So it always makes me a bit anxious because I put so much energy and so much passion into my obsessions. Currently, that obsession is public speaking and trying to educate people, which I think is really important. That's currently my passion in life, mainly because I feel that by helping to educate people and raise awareness of autism and things like that, I can, in a small way, rectify past injustices and also help other people as well. I also find it quite cathartic for myself. I do have some other interests outside of public speaking. It's just that public speaking is the one interest that I'm most passionate about, and that means the most to me. It really gives my life order and meaning, and that's why I do get anxious before I'm due to give a talk, because although I get really excited about them, I want to make sure I do them well and that I get good feedback, and I'm always worried in case something will stop me doing them, because that to me would feel like the end of the world. But as I say, I do have some other interests as well. For example, I'm currently interested in the Studio Ghibli films, some Japanese anime, which I like watching. I would say that's not an obsession, that's more just a strong interest, which gives my life some meaning and purpose. And I also enjoy doing, I'm always trying to learn. I like reading. The books I read do tend to follow similar themes. For example, I like reading science books about biology, particularly books about nutrition, because I'm interested in food. I've always been interested in food. Before the Kate Winslet obsession, that was what I was obsessed about as a child, which I could talk about in another video. Currently, I would say it's not an obsession like it was when I was a child, but it is still a strong interest. So I'm interested in nutrition, and I read books about nutrition. I read books about the brain, because I'm interested in how the brain works, mainly in an attempt to better understand myself. I'm very interested in neuroscience. I read a range of different books, really. I'm very interested in people and how people work, which again is kind of not really very stereotypical, because many people think autistic people aren't interested in people, but actually I am interested in people at one remove. I like reading books about people. I like studying people. A bit like David Attenborough might study animals, I study people. After all, people are humans. We are animals, aren't we? We're Homo sapiens. So I'm a bit of I sort of study them, a bit like an anthropologist. I like studying people. On a sort of scientific, evolutionary level, it's very, very interesting. I'm quite interested in philosophy. I'm interested in culture. So my interests are all people-based, really, and always have been. So that's where I do not follow the stereotype. My interests, though, as I say, they become I get very, very obsessed with things. Just not with computers, not with gadgets, but with people. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed listening to this video and that it gave you some insight into some of my obsessions, past and present, and other interests. I hope to do other videos on the same topic, because it's such a big area. I'd like to talk a bit more about my obsession with food as a child as well, and my interest in general, and in another video. Yeah. Okay, so thanks for listening.